What's happening, mixed martial arts fans? Ryan Thomas here for a special episode, of course, the monthly episode of the UFC main event preview and prediction for this pay-per-view event, UFC 260. Before I get into who I believe will win in this epic heavyweight title clash between Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou. Not just any fight, but a heavyweight title fight rematch, as Stipe and Francis fought one another once before. Stipe the victor, Stipe and still. And this is a case now, 3 years later. 3 years later, Stipe has cemented himself as the greatest heavyweight of all time. Francis Ngannou has cemented himself as the most devastating striker that the UFC heavyweight division has ever seen. So we know where we're at. We know where we stand. These are the two best UFC heavyweights, maybe in their own right. I'd say Francis is the most devastating striker. Stipe, without a doubt, the resume is just glaring, is fantastic, is amazing in terms of what he has done in his MMA career. So before I get into who I believe will win that fight and why and how, and analyze the fight, preview the fight, and predict the fight, Buffalo Sabres just had puck drop in Boston. They're looking to end the 16-game winless streak. And being that this podcast is based in Buffalo, Linus Ullmark is back in net for the Sabres. I'm hoping that the Sabres get a bounce or two. And hopefully Linus Ullmark is ready to stand on his head, and the Sabres can finally end this dumpster fire of a losing streak, this dumpster fire of a season, and somewhat have some respectability, if possible. I don't even know if that's possible at this point, but I'd love to see them get a win, get one in the win column, especially against the Boston Bruins. Just throwing that out there. The show has been doing very well. The last show that I did was Wednesday. Today's Saturday, March 27th, 2021. And Wednesday I had not one, not two, but three guests on the show. I had Lou Michel, Buffalo News crime reporter. We talked about his book, American Terrorist, the Timothy McVeigh story. It is a little bit out of my comfort zone. Obviously, this is a sports show, but it was a book that I was fascinated by, and a book that you guys should go out and get as well. Big fan of the writer, Lou Michel. Awesome show. Check it out. As well, Dan Fates, Rochester sports anchor, Wham 13 sports anchor Dan Fates, hopped on for his second appearance on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, and we talked about the Buffalo Bills offseason, what to expect the rest of the way, NFL draft discussion. We're inching closer to the NFL draft, of course. And you guys know I am very, very in tune with the NFL draft. That's probably the one thing that I cover so well, more than anything on this podcast end of things, is the NFL draft. So I'm very excited for that. I'll keep you guys posted on all things NFL draft in the coming weeks as we inch closer to the month of April. And stay tuned for that. As well, the grand finale on Wednesday was a man that needs no introduction. Bruce, quote-unquote, Bruce Nolan, Bruce exclusive of Buffalo Rumblings. He joined me on the show, the Oz of Bills Mafia. No one knows what he looks like. No one knows who he actually is. We just get a voice. And I wish I could pull that off. Too late for that. People know who I am. They know my face. They know everything. You know, there's no, everybody knows who I am, obviously, so. Not everybody. I'm not saying it like everybody. I'm saying it like, you guys know who I am. I'm not behind a curtain like the Wizard of Oz. Who rang that bell? So, check that out. Bruce Nolan, air quotes, Bruce Nolan, Bruce exclusive. Must have been a Bruce Almighty fan. Dan Fates, Rochester sports anchor, and Lou Michel, crime reporter for the Buffalo News, going into his 30th year as a crime reporter for the Buffalo News. So I greatly enjoyed all three of those podcasts, all three of those interviews. And I look forward to having more guests on the show. That's my main goal for this show is to have different guests each and every week, as many guests as I can possibly get. And I think that's what makes the show grow, and that's what makes the show that much more fun. So I'm excited to see, what the future holds as far as having more guests on the show. So, with that being said, tonight, Saturday night, March 27th, Stipe Miocic looks to defend his title once again against Francis Ngannou. And boy, a lot has changed in the last 3 years since Stipe Miocic last fought Francis Ngannou. The only thing that's remained the same is that Stipe is the champ, but he had an epic 3-fight trilogy rivalry with former UFC-led heavyweight champion, former UFC heavyweight champion, and now UFC commentator Daniel Cormier. And Stipe was 2-1. Lost the first fight, won the second fight, and finished it off with a win in the trilogy bout, which took place last August. So it's been a long time coming for Stipe. What a run, though, that Francis Ngannou has been on since he lost his first crack at the UFC heavyweight title 3 years ago. Knocking out Junior Dos Santos, knocking out Cain Velasquez, knocking out Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Safe to say, a dud of a fight between Ngannou and Derek Lewis. I thought that one would be a lot more entertaining than what it was. But Francis Ngannou is, without a doubt, the most terrifying fighter that the UFC has ever seen. And we knew that going into the first fight, but this second fight, I am saying that I'm more petrified of Francis Ngannou heading into this second one. I would be if I was Stipe, especially. I'd be more, nervous about Francis this time around than I was even the first time, due to the fact that Francis has gotten better. Francis Ngannou has gotten better. He's a lot better. He's more patient. He fights smarter. And he has been able to develop, a little bit more of a patient approach in his fights. And that patient approach has paid off in fights like the Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight. And I know he knocked Jairzinho Rozenstruik out in relatively quick fashion, but the setups on how he's throwing these punches, on how he's landing these punches, he is not the full-out aggressor. He's the counterpuncher, waiting to knock out his opponent. And I really liked the strategy that Ngannou has imposed over the last, 3-4 of his fights. I'm thinking to myself, what makes a rematch so special in any case, let alone in a UFC heavyweight title fight, is the fact that each fight is different. So, come tomorrow morning when I'm recapping this fight on the Thomas Take post-fight reaction show to UFC 260, Miocic versus Ngannou, I'll be able to say, this person won or that person won or here's why, all that stuff. But I'll be able to say that the second fight went differently than the first. I really don't see the exact same sequence taking place twice in a row. Whether Miocic wins, the result might be the same, but how we get there is going to be very different. I trust that take. That is me saying that both Stipe and Francis have become much better. Really, where Stipe needs to take this fight, he needs to do his best Daniel Cormier impersonation, and take this fight to the mat like he did the first time. Weather the storm, take it to the ground, weather the storm, take it to the ground, and wear down Francis Ngannou. And I'm sure that is the game plan of Stipe. He'd be a fool not to impose a very similar game plan, but I do see Francis Ngannou being more prepared for that this time around than he was the first time around. Very green last time around, first title fight, first really big fight against top-level competition. Now he has fought the who's who. He's fought Junior Dos Santos, he's fought Cain Velasquez, he's fought Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Derek Lewis. He's more experienced now this time around than he was the second time around. Now, ultimately, Stipe is more experienced as well than Francis prior to the first fight and far more experienced prior to the second fight. But is it good experience that Stipe has accrued over the last 3 years? As I said, 3 fights with Daniel Cormier. They were all pretty grueling fights. The first one, Stipe was knocked out. Second one, he wins. Third one, he wins. But they were long fights, second and third fight. Third fight went to decision. Second fight I believe he knocked him out. I can't remember off the top of my head, but my point is Stipe was hit with some shots in those fights with Daniel Cormier. Stipe is known for having a great chin, but you took some dents. You put some, you allowed DC to put some dents in that chin, and will that be enough for Francis to fully finish it and really, make this one a knockout win for himself, winning the UFC heavyweight title? Let me tell you this. If Francis Ngannou pulls this off tonight, he immediately becomes the biggest superstar in mixed martial arts, surpassing Israel Adesanya, surpassing Conor McGregor, just for this purpose, that he's the heavyweight champion of the world. He would be the heavyweight champion of the world. He's a devastating striker, and that is what casual fans flock to. Whereas Conor, he's still the biggest draw, of course, but he doesn't have a belt. Israel Adesanya, his drawing power took a little bit of a hit, losing to Jan Blachowicz, regardless of the weight class, and going up from middleweight to light heavyweight. His drawing power took a hit. He lost. Goes back down to 185. It's business as usual. He'll probably fight Darren Till if Till gets past Marvin Vettori in mid-April. But I'm feeling the star power kind of fade away from Israel after that Jan fight, in my opinion. Whereas the star power for Francis Ngannou, it's going to be through the roof. It's going to be through the roof. So I am very curious to see how this fight plays out, obviously. Does Stipe impose the same style that he has from the first fight? Does Francis attack things a little bit differently? I would certainly hope so. Ultimately, though, we are talking about a particular sport known as mixed martial arts. Who can mix their martial arts tools better than the other? That's who, more oftentimes than not, in a title fight, or in any fight actually, wins the fight. Who can mix the disciplines better? And I feel Stipe has a better mix of skills than Francis. But 71% of the time, a fighter that wins the first fight usually loses the second fight. You can look no further than Daniel Cormier himself, beating Stipe the first time, losing to Stipe the second time. So, history says Francis is going to win this fight. MMA history says Francis is going to get this done and that he's going to be the first UFC heavyweight champion born in Africa. That's a big deal. And obviously, the star power of Francis is big, but with that belt, that's the key to everything. Ultimately, though, I can't picture Francis evolving that much more in the last 3 years to get even with Stipe as far as their abilities to mix the disciplines. I think Stipe is going to take this to the ground successfully and make this a true MMA fight, whereas Francis, his best hope is catching him early. That is still his best hope. So ultimately, I do have Stipe Miocic winning and retaining his UFC heavyweight title, and I have Francis Ngannou going home empty-handed. But hey, losing twice to the greatest heavyweight of all time is not necessarily a bad thing. I will go as far to say that this is the toughest test of Stipe's career. This version of Francis Ngannou, I would not be stunned, not be shocked in the slightest if Francis Ngannou pulled this off tonight via knockout in the first round. Could go either way. It's a pick'em fight. Even though Ngannou is the slight favorite heading into this one. Stipe is a betting underdog 4 times in his UFC heavyweight title fights. He's won 4 of them. So, I think Stipe deserves a little bit more respect. Francis, on the other hand, phenomenal career. What he's done has been sensational, but has he evolved enough? I just don't know. That's the biggest question, I think, heading into this fight. And I'm going to say no because of the fact that it's only been 3 years and Stipe is still pretty damn good. I got Stipe winning it. UFC 260 preview and prediction. Miocic versus Ngannou for the heavyweight strap. The UFC heavyweight title is on the line tonight. Enjoy the fights, everybody. Stay tuned for more. Follow the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take, Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take, and YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Subscribe, follow along, and I appreciate the support. Take care, fight fans.